Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. We got to begin out of the gate with all these accusations against Barack Obama and his administration because they're tied directly into the shootings and violence against ICE agents in this country. Yes, just bear with me here. I want to make a somewhat nuanced case, and I try to trust that my audience is smart enough, and I believe you are, to have a nuanced argument made to you, because we need to step back to 2016 and what Barack Obama was doing after the election, because it plays directly into now the violence and shootings against ICE agents, and they're going to start getting murdered as the left turns violence, and it's all from a similar thing. And I want to explain this one to you because I I maintain, don't turn me off when I say this because you'll appreciate the point I ultimately make, but I do maintain the reason President Trump has rushed back to 2016 to argue about what Barack Obama did or may have done has everything to do with trying to reunite his base now that's been obsessed over Epstein. They're upset of the president's handling of Epstein, and he's like, look over here instead. Look at Barack Obama. Let's look at him and what he did. And I gotta explain to you what he actually did, because there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors going on by the Trump team here as well. They have a broad, valid point, however, and it plays into the shooting of ICE agents now. So follow along with me down my personal rabbit hole. If you read my morning piece on Substack, you know where I'm going, but just follow with me. So here's what the Obama team knew after the election in 2016. They knew, one, the Russians had not hacked voting machines in the United States. They had not hacked and altered votes. Two, they knew the Russians were not trying to steer the election to Donald Trump. They knew both of those things. Three, they knew what the Russians were trying to do was interfere in the American election in this way: by spending money to influence people's opinions, whether they were for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, to be as antagonistic to each other as possible, so that Americans turn inward in their arguments and hatred of each other and ignored the rest of the world. Essentially, the Russians wanted us at each other's throats so we couldn't dominate the world. And it worked, by the way. Look at where we've been since 2016. The Russians didn't spend a lot of money, but through social media accounts and bots and the like, they've been able to manipulate people's emotions. They've been able to drive conversations. They've been able to get Americans to believe each other is a greater threat than the Russians, for example. You have an entire influence operation dedicated to advancing Russian propaganda. Remember that organization that was on the right, included a number of right-wing social media influencers, and the Russians were funneling money through that company to amplify Russian talking points about Ukraine, among other things. It's what the Russians have been doing. The Obama team knew all along the Russians were not trying to steal the election. The Obama team knew all along they were not in it for Donald Trump. They were just in it to sow discord in this country. They knew all of that. In particular, they knew the Russians were not trying to hack voting machines in this country. So, what did the Obama team do? Very cleverly, they began to tell the press the Russians were hacking the election. A layman concerned about the rise of electronic voting machines in this country was clearly going to interpret that as they were trying to steal votes from electronic voting machines. That's not what the Obama team meant by it. They meant they were trying to essentially hack into our emotions to sow discord. They were trying to shape the information war in the election. By hacking the election, though, that was a phrase the media could use and allow people to interpret it as they wanted. And in fact, many members of the press at the time interpreted it as the Russians were stealing the election. The Russians were stealing the election. The talking point from the Obama team was specifically designed to muddy the water and make it sound like the Russians were trying to physically steal votes from electronic voting machines, even though that's not actually what the Obama team meant. And they could have some level of plausible deniability. But listen to this press montage. This is from after the 2016 election.
Russia hacking the election to elect Trump is the end of our democracy. Votes were definitely affected. Russia hacked the election to tilt it to Mr. Trump.
The Russians definitively hacked the election.
Russia did hack the election.
No doubt. The Russians hacked the election.
Yes, Russia hacked the election.
Fact, Russia hacked the election.
President-elect Donald Trump still not sounding convinced that Russia hacked the election.
The president does not want to come to terms with the fact that the Russians hacked the election.
President Trump says he still wonders if the Russians hacked the election.
If you can get him to accept that Russia hacked the election, see if you can get him to accept who won the Civil War.
If he admits it, it casts a shadow on his victory over Hillary Clinton.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Let's be clear, Russia hacked the election. Definitively, Russia hacked the election, and Russia is doing it again now.
Election-related cyber hacking.
Cyber hacking of U.S. elections. Cyber hacking of the election.
Russia was cyber hacking the election.
Russia was cyber hacking the election.
The CIA, the FBI, NSA.
All of these intelligence organizations,
17 intelligence agencies,
all conclude that Russia hacked the election.
If we find out that Donald Trump just theoretically was colluding with Russia while they were hacking the election, that is completely impeachable.
This dossier alleged a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian effort to hack the election.
The director of national intelligence, the head of the National Security Agency, the head of the FBI, all of these intelligence experts saying Russia hacked the election.
the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, I mean, they've all said this. So to believe that that's wrong, you have to believe they're all involved in an elaborate conspiracy to get Donald Trump, which seems a little far-fetched to me.
Wasn't far-fetched at all. Thank you to Newsbusters for putting that together. And so what did they say? They said hack the election, and it made it sound like they were hacking voting machines. What they meant is the Russians, there was an email hack for John Podesta. They hacked emails. They got Hillary Clinton's emails from her server, among other things. And the Russians were spending money on social media. They were waging a bot army. But by saying it was hacking the election, it made people think they were stealing votes. And so now, fast forward to now, here's NBC News' tweet about what Donald Trump is doing right now. President Trump's intelligence chiefs are conducting a systematic campaign to rewrite the history of the 2016 election, seeking to reverse an 8-year-old assessment that Russia waged an information war to boost Trump's candidacy. Waged an information war. Now they're closer to the truth. The Russians waged an information war. They did do that in 2016. That's what Bob Mueller in his investigation found. But what Mueller concluded in his investigation was not that the Russians were waging an information war for Donald Trump, but the Russians were waging an information war for both sides, so that both sides turned hostile and antagonistic towards each other, and we faded from the rest of the world. That's what it was. It was an information war. But that's not how they talked about it in 2016. They talked about it as hacking the election, which left in people's minds the idea that the Russians were trying to steal votes. And the Obama team knew they weren't, and the Obama team refused to clarify. They allowed it to linger in the air that the Russians maybe were actually physically stealing votes for Donald Trump. And they knew it wasn't true, and they refused to say anything about it. Now, good luck convicting Barack Obama of something, given Trump versus United States, that Supreme Court case that gave presidents broad immunity. Good luck trying to prosecute him. I see a lot of people who aren't lawyers say, no, I heard it on the internet. They're going to be able to prosecute him. Good luck trying. Good luck if you want to try to do it. Good luck. Help yourself. Help yourself. But the Obama team did know that they were seeding this. Now, let's fast forward to the Colbert stuff, because it's all directly related. So now they're trying to claim Donald Trump is an authoritarian, a tyrant, and Stephen Colbert attacked Paramount for settling with Donald Trump, and 3 days later his show was canceled. That's what you've heard, correct? That's what you've heard in the media. 3 days after Colbert attacked Paramount for settling with Donald Trump, he got fired. Turns out CBS made the decision in June before settling with Donald Trump that given the finances of the late night, it was time to sever ties. And they didn't tell Colbert until 3 days after he got back from vacation and made his attack on Paramount. The decision happened well before that. It's now documented. It is now confirmed, despite everything you've heard in the media, that clearly Donald Trump was probably involved. Turns out not only was he not involved and it had nothing to do with the settlement talks, but Colbert's team knew they were canceling late night before they told Colbert when he came back from vacation. Which gets me to ICE. See, what Obama did in 2016 is he played to the vanities and biases of the press. And he knew if we say he hacked, that the Russians were hacking the election, they were going to ask what we meant by that. They were just going to run it and leave the impression that the Russians were stealing the election from Donald Trump or for Donald Trump. The Democrats manipulated the press's antagonism for Donald Trump. They manipulated the emotions of the press so that the press could try to manipulate you. And they're now doing it again with ICE agents. This is a recurring pattern by Democrats and progressives manipulating the press. Remember the story I told you about the other day? A woman claimed that ICE agents surrounded her in a Jack in the Box parking lot in Los Angeles, put her in a car, drove her to the border, told her sign paperwork to self-deport or else, and she refused and was held in a warehouse. I now have the original reporting from KTLA, and I want to play that for you because it's very important that you hear this. It's very much in the same vein of the phrase hack the election. This is KTLA in Los Angeles.
Some people in South LA are outraged, and they are demanding answers tonight after a mother of 3 and longtime LA resident was taken in an unmarked vehicle last week on her way to work.
Julie Calderon's family says she was finally able to call them days after being detained. KTLA's Sarah Welch is live in South LA, where the community is calling for her release. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, John. They are. And late this afternoon, we learned that the woman's daughter received a text message from a number that she wasn't familiar with, stating that their mother was at a warehouse in San Clemente. Now, they don't know this for sure, and that's why they're demanding answers from immigration officials tonight on exactly where she is.
The last 5 days have been a nightmare.
Because the family of Julie Calderon doesn't know where their mother is.
What's happening is absolutely horrific, and it's unacceptable.
Last Wednesday night, Calderon was on her way to her janitorial job when she tells her family she was followed by 2 unmarked vehicles along Alameda. Feeling unsafe, she pulled into this parking lot in South LA.
Ununiformed men and unmarked cars kidnapped Julie.
The family lawyer says Calderon has been able to make 2 phone calls since this happened, telling them the men didn't identify themselves. And instead of taking her to a detention center in LA, she was driven to San Ysidro.
She was taken straight from here to the border and pressured to sign self-deportation paperwork.
And when she refused and asked to speak with a lawyer, she was transported with others to a warehouse Calderon says is not far from where she was initially taken.
She told us that some people had been in that warehouse for months. She said they are keeping us here until we agree to sign voluntary self-deportation paperwork.
You will not be surprised to know KTLA did not get ICE or Homeland Security in that story. They just ran it as factual. They ran it as factual. It was all a lie. How many people saw that and haven't heard the correction? It's like the story out of Pennsylvania about the Chilean man who was died in ICE custody. Turns out he was in a hospital in Guatemala. None of it was true. He died before COVID in Chile in 2019. The media is so easily manipulated by the Democrats because of their hatred and biases of the right. They're going to get ICE agents killed. They inspired people to try to assassinate Donald Trump with all the claims from the left. And the media, it refuses to learn their lesson because they're okay at this point, I think, being the enemies of the republic, the way they are behaving themselves. They are lying. Obama manipulated the press to seed a false narrative against Donald Trump in the same way progressives are now manipulating the press to seed a false narrative about ICE. In the former case, it nearly got Donald Trump assassinated. In the latter case, it's getting ICE agents shot. Democrats are playing dirty tricks, which you expect the Democrats to do. At this point, it's the press that is the agent of violence in this country. It is the press that is inspiring violence against federal workers and the president of the United States by their willingness to be so easily manipulated through their own biases.
Have something to say? Call the show. 1-877-97-ERIC. That's 1-877-973-7425.